At some point during your awakening journey, perhaps following a profound spiritual realization or personal crisis, something fundamental changed. You glimpsed the illusion, recognized the patterns, heard the noise, and then experienced silence. Initially, it felt transformative, even liberating, but gradually that sense of purpose simply dissolved. Not suddenly or dramatically, but quietly, as though your soul dimmed life's intensity and never restored it. You ceased striving, ceased caring, not recklessly, but with that quiet, existential resignation. The question grew increasingly persistent. Why this numbness now that truth has finally revealed itself? A peculiar contradiction exists here. We anticipate spiritual awakening will fuel our enthusiasm. Yet for countless individuals, particularly the deeply reflective ones, the empaths, the truth seekers, it produces the reverse effect. It depletes us. I recall a conversation with a friend, exceptionally intelligent, spiritually connected, devoted to all the essential texts, Eckhart Tolle, Alan Watts, Krishnamurti. Following a profound dark night of the soul, she experienced a massive awakening. She understood. She claimed to have seen beyond the illusion of identity, ego, and the pursuit of external validation. Yet 2 months afterward, she lay staring at her ceiling, struggling to rise from bed. She confessed, "I once agonized over insufficient achievement. Now I'm indifferent to accomplishing anything whatsoever. I expected awakening to illuminate me, not abandon me like this." Carl Jung, the founder of analytical psychology, identified this post-awakening haze decades ago. He didn't employ contemporary spiritual language, but he comprehended what occurs when the unconscious surfaces into consciousness. Jung observed, your ego hasn't vanished. It is disoriented. It has lost its navigation. And without new direction, motivation evaporates. So you haven't lost motivation or fallen into depression. You're simply suspended. You've awakened from something, but haven't yet awakened into anything new. But here is where it becomes intriguing and profoundly misunderstood. What you're experiencing right now isn't failure. It is not clinical depression or anxiety. It is something ancient and sacred. Jung actually cautioned that our contemporary world avoids this phase entirely, this sacred pause, this emptiness, this liminal space. He considered it essential for genuine individuation, the process of becoming your authentic self. But nobody mentions this part, do they? And that is precisely what we'll explore next. What is actually occurring in your psyche following awakening, and how this motivation loss might represent the most significant spiritual evolution you've ever encountered, if properly understood before continuing. If you're someone passionate about expanding consciousness and exploring life's deeper dimensions, subscribe to Fractal Wisdom. This channel exists to illuminate the invisible and support those navigating the complex and extraordinary path of awakening. So if you've been drifting in that post-awakening haze, questioning where your vitality disappeared, understand you're not losing your mind. You're undergoing a psychological transformation most people cannot articulate, a shift so profound. It doesn't merely adjust your thinking, it rewrites your entire operating system. All those goals you previously pursued, the task lists, the long-term plans, the productivity mantras, they no longer inspire you. Not because you're failing, but because your motivation architecture itself is restructuring. And Carl Jung recognized this long before it became social media discourse. Let's examine this closely. Throughout most of your existence, your motivation originated from ego identity, the self you believed yourself to be. You sought validation, visibility, success, love. That is not inherently negative. It is simply human developmental psychology. Jung termed this the persona, the social mask we construct to function in society. But awakening strips away the mask. Suddenly you're not seeking approval, not competing in the game, because you perceive the game, and that is where it becomes strange. Without the mask, your previous objectives no longer fit. They were designed for a version of you that is ceased to exist. So now you're like an actor who is stepped off stage and cannot determine their lines anymore. That is why you feel unmotivated. You didn't lose ambition. You outgrew the fuel that sustained it. Carl Jung believed we're not here to serve the ego. We're here to integrate it, to harmonize it with something greater. He called this process individuation, the journey of transforming from fragmented identity into unified wholeness. Not the limited self-seeking validation, but the transcendent self, the soul-level center within you, connecting to everything. And this self doesn't concern itself with status, approval, or even certainty. It exists to express truth. So once awakening occurs, your psyche begins recalibrating. It starts rejecting anything inauthentic, forced, or ego-driven. That includes careers, relationships, aspirations, and even your meticulously crafted vision board from years past. That is why people frequently describe awakening as simultaneously liberating and destabilizing. But Jung warned, if we stop here, we become trapped. Some people awaken and fall into spiritual bypassing, convincing themselves nothing matters, that everything's merely illusion, so they disconnect, drift, and numb themselves. They confuse detachment with disengagement, but the self desires something different. It wants to live through you. It wants to manifest heaven within this human form. It doesn't reject the world. It redefines your participation in it. To step into that, you must traverse a peculiar intermediate phase, Jung described perfectly, and few recognize while experiencing it. There is a phase following awakening that rarely receives discussion. It is not glamorous, and it doesn't generate social media engagement. It doesn't resemble meditating in Bali or composing profound spiritual quotes. It looks like this, sitting in silence, unable to articulate yourself, while the world continues rushing past. Carl Jung would say you're not lost, you're transitioning, you've disidentified from ego, but haven't yet discovered how to live from the self. This space isn't failure, it is initiation, but in our hyper-productive culture, stillness gets misdiagnosed as apathy, pause gets mistaken for stagnation, so you judge yourself, and that judgment obstructs the very energy your soul is attempting to reclaim. Jung had terminology for this psychological pause. He called it enantiodromia, the process where phenomena transform into their opposite. When you awaken, your internal pendulum swings from ego-driven ambition to soul-level stillness. You transition from I must accomplish everything to why accomplish anything. And this swing is sacred. It is how equilibrium is restored in mythology and ancient wisdom. This is the hermit phase, the death preceding rebirth. It is the moment the caterpillar liquefies inside the chrysalis. Not yet a butterfly. No longer a caterpillar, just dissolution. And yes, dissolution doesn't accomplish tasks. It doesn't hustle. It transforms. This is where ego panics. It demands action, identity, direction. But the self whispers release. I'm constructing something deeper. Here is where contemporary spirituality often bypasses the difficult aspects. It teaches simply follow your bliss or maintain high vibrations only. And while intention and energy matter, Carl Jung would tell you if you avoid the darkness, you forfeit the treasure. Jung believed shadow integration, confronting the repressed uncomfortable aspects of yourself, is essential for wholeness. not optional, not supplementary. It is the fundamental curriculum of human soul development. This sacred emptiness you're experiencing is where the unconscious finally gains space to emerge. You're not failing, you're integrating, and your psyche possesses incredible wisdom. It will deliberately stall your motivation, your drive, even your access to clarity. So you're compelled to feel, witness, and reclaim what you've suppressed. That is the genuine work. And here is the beautiful paradox. When you cease resisting the void, something remarkable begins happening. Motivation starts returning. But it feels fundamentally different this time. It is not anxious. It is not performative. It is not hustle. It is something more ancient and quieter, a kind of soul-guided movement that feels like remembering rather than pursuing. Jung called this the emergence of the self, not as concept, but as living inner compass. So you've traversed the void, you've experienced the silence, the stillness, the profound pause, and now something new is beginning to awaken inside you. Not a lightning strike and not fireworks, more like a quiet inner pull, not to return to your former life, but to construct a new one. This is where the self begins speaking, not through words, but through nudges, through resonance, through what Carl Jung called the symbolic life, but to construct a new one. He believed that once ego has surrendered and the unconscious is integrated, we become capable of living from a place deeper than personality. That is when life stops being about survival and becomes about meaning. And here is an unexpected reality. It is often beautifully ordinary. When the self leads, you don't hustle, you respond. You're not motivated by scarcity or fear. You're guided by what feels aligned. You no longer chase clarity. You recognize it upon arrival, living from the self. Doesn't mean you'll always feel motivated in conventional terms. You might still experience waves of exhaustion, confusion, even sorrow. That is being human. But what you won't experience is that persistent sense of inner betrayal, the feeling of forcing yourself through a life that doesn't fit. Instead, you might begin noticing you're drawn to create even without an audience. You decline things that don't resonate. Even if they appear impressive, you start following not your obligations. You choose peace over performance. This is the new fuel. It is not adrenaline. It is alignment. Jung called this living symbolically, not in fantasy, but with soul, where you begin trusting your inner imagery, dreams, synchronicities, intuitive feelings as guidance. So what does this look like practically? Sometimes it is as simple as asking different questions. Instead of, what should I do? Ask, what is quietly calling me? Instead of, what is the plan? Ask, where is life guiding me? Instead of, how can I prove myself? Ask what feels authentic. You begin participating with life instead of attempting to control it. And it means transforming it. Ambition becomes devotion to truth, to presence, to growth. And ironically, that kind of energy accomplishes far more effectively than ego ever could. But now it is sustainable. Now it is soul-powered. This is the self's motivation, not to impress, but to express. And it frequently leads you to create, serve, heal, teach, and build. Not because you should, but because your entire being responds. Yes. So if you've been feeling like your spark has vanished after awakening, it is the old fire that extinguished. So you could discover a deeper flame, one that doesn't waver when external circumstances shift. Carl Jung didn't promise an easy journey. And if you're here, engaging with this, you're already walking that path. It is not about recovering your old motivation. It is about discovering a new one, rooted in wholeness, not performance. This isn't the conclusion of your awakening. It is the beginning of your becoming. If this resonated with you, if it helped you articulate something you've been silently experiencing, leave a comment below. I genuinely appreciate hearing what this journey has felt like for you. And if you want more content like this, where we explore psychology, soul, and self-awareness in ways that actually translate to real life, subscribe to Fractal Wisdom. Because awakening isn't the end of the story. It is where the authentic story begins.